Frankly, the bank manager stated, her voice dripping with condescension as she pushed the withdrawal slip back across the marble counter. "We can't serve you here." She leaned in, her smile cold. Perhaps the check-cashing place down the street. "They're more accustomed to handling your type of banking needs." The woman in the simple hoodie met the manager's gaze, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. The manager had no idea she was speaking to the CEO, the owner of the very ground she stood on, and the consequences of her words were about to become devastatingly clear. How does it feel to be judged unworthy by the very people you lead? For Eleanor Vance, today wasn't just about finding answers. It was about confronting a painful truth. "I'm sorry, but we can't just hand out cash to anyone who walks in." "Bank manager." Lauren Hayes stated, her voice a cascade of condescension. She pushed the withdrawal slip back across the polished counter towards the unassuming black woman before her. "Especially not amounts like this." The words ricocheted through the cavernous marble lobby of Meridian Financial's flagship branch, drawing glances. A knot of staff members observed, one whispering audibly to another. "Yeah, right. Doesn't even look like she has that kind of money." A ripple of unkind laughter followed. Standing amidst them, dignity a practiced shield against the mounting humiliation, was Eleanor Vance, the bank's CEO, currently undercover. A sharp memory surfaced, unbidden, a similar dismissal years ago. A skeptical voice, doubting her potential, simply based on appearance. That echo from the past only strengthened her resolve now. These employees, caught in their bubble of bias, had no inkling their world was about to implode. This calculated encounter began moments earlier. Eleanor, posture straight, expression carefully neutral, had approached the counter. 25 years separated this moment from her first day as a teller trainee wearing a name tag and ill-fitting uniform. Her ascent hadn't been paved with privilege, but with relentless determination, sharp intellect, and an unwavering work ethic that saw her master every rung of the corporate ladder: teller, loan officer, branch manager, regional director, an MBA from Harvard record-breaking quarters, a reputation as the executive who could turn struggling operations around. Reaching the C-suite as COO 5 years prior, many assumed she'd hit the ceiling. They were wrong. 3 months ago, following the previous CEO's retirement, the board had chosen her Meridian Financial's first black woman leader, despite contentious private debates questioning if clients were ready for her face representing the company. Her acceptance speech promise, the same level of respect and excellence for everyone, no exceptions, wasn't mere rhetoric. Disturbing patterns in customer complaints, hidden disparities beneath glossy satisfaction, scores particularly impacting certain demographics at specific branches. Like this one demanded investigation. Reports weren't enough. Eleanor needed to see the unfiltered reality herself. Hence the navy hoodie, the simple slacks, the deliberate anonymity. She needed to know what happened when the CEO wasn't watching. Sometimes the most revealing truths aren't spoken, but witnessed. Seated anonymously, Eleanor Vance watched the bank's carefully crafted image unravel one biased interaction at a time. Having stated her purpose was investigation, Eleanor stepped back from the counter after Lauren Hayes' initial dismissal, retreating to a waiting area chair as if considering her options. From this vantage point, ostensibly checking her phone, she began her real work, observing. What unfolded over the next 15 minutes painted a picture far more damning than any internal report could convey. It wasn't just isolated incidents. It was a pattern woven into the fabric of the branch's daily operations. First, a white businessman, sharp suit radiating importance, approached the entrance. Before his expensive shoes even fully crossed the threshold, a staff member intercepted him with a deferential smile. "Good morning, sir. How can we assist you today?" He was immediately ushered towards a private desk, bypassing the queue. Entirely his transaction handled with swift efficiency and murmured pleasantries. Minutes later, an elderly Asian couple entered, quiet and unassuming. They were met with a curt gesture towards the ticket dispenser and the waiting area. No welcoming smile, no offer of assistance, just a pointing finger and an air of dismissal. They took a number and sat down patiently, their faces impassive. Next, a young white woman dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt approached the quick service counter. The teller, Chloe Miller, the same one who would soon assist Eleanor, engaged her in friendly chatter, asking about weekend plans while processing her deposit. The entire interaction was completed in under 2 minutes, punctuated by laughter. Then, a Hispanic man wearing the unmistakable work clothes of a janitor stepped up to that very same counter. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Suddenly, the teller's expression became guarded. There were requests for multiple forms of identification, questions about the source of the check he presented, a suspicious once-over that lingered uncomfortably. His simple check-cashing request stretched into nearly 10 minutes of scrutiny, the efficiency afforded the previous customer evaporating completely. Eleanor watched this subtle yet undeniable hierarchy of service play out 6 more times. Appearance perceived wealth race. These were the invisible currencies determining the level of respect and efficiency granted within these marble walls. She noted the almost imperceptible change in body language, the forced smiles versus genuine ones, the swift service versus deliberate delays. All the while, her own wait time ticked upwards. 37 minutes had passed since she entered. Despite the branch being only moderately busy, 3 white customers who had arrived after her had already concluded their business and departed. The evidence was irrefutable, playing out in real time. Finally accepting the ticket number she'd discreetly taken earlier was unlikely to be called any time soon, she decided it was time to approach the counter directly. Her investigation was about to enter its most crucial and personal phase. The wait was over. Now, face to face with the system she aimed to understand, Eleanor Vance braced herself for the subtle aggressions she knew were coming. But would she anticipate just how blatant they would become? As Eleanor finally reached the counter, stepping into the space recently vacated by the casually dressed young woman, the atmosphere perceptibly chilled. She met the gaze of the teller, Chloe Miller. The easy smile Chloe had shared with the previous customer vanished, replaced by a neutral, almost wary mask. "How can I help you?" Chloe asked, her tone polite but distinctly cooler. Lacking the earlier warmth, "I'd like to make a withdrawal." "Please," Eleanor stated clearly, sliding her driver's license and a completed withdrawal slip across the smooth marble counter. The requested amount was clearly written, $15,000, sir. Chloe Miller's eyes widened almost imperceptibly as she took the slip. She glanced at the amount, then at Eleanor's simple attire, then back at the slip. A flicker of surprise, perhaps disbelief, crossed her features before being quickly suppressed. She picked up the driver's license, scanned the photo, looked directly at Eleanor's face, then back at the license, a silent, unnecessary verification. "This is a large amount," Chloe said, her voice pitched just slightly higher than before, high enough to carry to the next station. "Yes, it is," Eleanor replied, keeping her voice calm and even. She refused to show any defensiveness. "But it's well within the daily withdrawal limit for my account type." Chloe offered no response. Instead, she hesitated, then turned her head slightly, and whispered something towards Daniel Peterson, the senior teller working at the adjacent window. Daniel, a man who carried himself with an air of bored authority, glanced over at Eleanor, his eyes doing a quick, dismissive sweep. He gave Chloe a curt nod. Then, abandoning his own station, he walked over to stand directly behind Chloe, effectively looming over the counter, and Eleanor. His presence was an immediate, unspoken assertion of control. "Is there a problem here?" Daniel asked, his voice unnecessarily loud, projecting into the lobby. Crucially, he didn't direct the question to his colleague, Chloe, but straight at Eleanor, instantly positioning her as the source of potential trouble. Heads turned throughout the bank. Conversations ceased. Customers waiting in line shifted their gazes drawn to the unfolding mini-drama. An older woman nearby clutched her purse a little tighter, a reflexive gesture of unease. Eleanor felt the familiar weight of collective scrutiny, the silent, immediate judgment, the ingrained assumption that her presence, her request, must somehow be irregular suspect. With practiced composure, honed over years of navigating such microaggressions and outright challenges, Eleanor placed her Meridian Financial bank card on the counter next to her ID. "No problem at all," she stated firmly, meeting Daniel's challenging gaze without flinching. "I am simply making a withdrawal from my account." Daniel picked up her ID, making a show of examining it with exaggerated scrutiny, holding it up to the light as if it were a questionable artifact. Well, he began drawing the word out. "We've been seeing some unusual activity on these types of accounts lately." He emphasized these types just enough, his meaning hanging unpleasantly in the air. "Bank policy requires us to be extra careful." Eleanor held his gaze. "What types of accounts would those be?" "Exactly, Mr." She deliberately let the question hang, highlighting his vague, biased insinuation. That faint memory of her old mentor's warning about preconceived notions echoed again, fueling a quiet fire beneath her calm exterior. Daniel completely ignored her question, turning back to the teller. "Chloe, can you pull up the full account? History, please. Let's see what kind of transaction patterns we're dealing with here." His tone implied a forensic investigation rather than a routine customer service query. As Chloe, looking increasingly uncomfortable but still compliant, began tapping nervously at her keyboard, another staff member, Ryan Collins, sauntered over, clearly drawn by the escalating tension. He leaned casually against the counter beside Daniel, inserting himself into the situation with an air of entitled amusement. He whispered something to Daniel, ensuring it was just loud enough for Eleanor, and likely others nearby, to hear. Probably one of those government payout things, or maybe trying some check-cashing scheme. Ryan didn't even attempt to hide his disdain, as his eyes performed a slow, deliberate scan of Eleanor taking in her simple hoodie, her dark slacks, her natural hair. A smirk played on his lips. He then addressed Eleanor directly, his voice oozing false sweetness. "We just need to verify that the funds are actually yours." He smiled a tight, unpleasant expression. "You understand, don't you? It's all for your protection, really." The condescension was thick enough to taste the implication. Clear someone like her couldn't possibly have legitimate access to such funds. The gauntlet had been thrown down. Authority arrives, but will it bring resolution or escalate the injustice? As the branch manager steps forward, the air crackles, promising a confrontation that will expose the rot at the core. The calculated humiliation orchestrated by Daniel Peterson and Ryan Collins was merely the opening act. The calculated insult about needing protection still hung in the air when Ryan called over Lauren Hayes, the branch manager. She strode across the polished marble floor with the unwavering confidence of someone accustomed to absolute authority within her domain, her expensive leather shoes squeaking faintly with each step. Her expression, was a carefully constructed mask, a blend of feigned concern and practiced command, perfected over 15 years. She approached the counter, her gaze sweeping over Eleanor, but not truly acknowledging her as an individual. Ma'am Lauren began, her voice smooth, but carrying an undercurrent of impatience, clearly irritated by the summons away from her office duties. I understand there's some confusion regarding your withdrawal request. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't ask Eleanor's name. She immediately assumed a position of superiority, addressing the situation as if Eleanor were inherently the problem. There were those subtle whispers about Lauren being under pressure, Eleanor recalled, but nothing could justify this immediate assumption of wrongdoing. There is no confusion on my part, Ms. Hayes, Eleanor replied deliberately, using the manager's name, gleaned from her prominently displayed nameplate, a subtle signal that she wasn't entirely uninformed. Her voice remained level, betraying none of the simmering indignation. I am simply attempting to access my own funds. Lauren's smile was purely cosmetic. It didn't reach her eyes, which remained cold, and assessing $15,000 is a significant amount of cash, she stated, echoing Chloe's earlier observation, but with added weight. Then came the question Eleanor knew was discriminatory, the one unasked of the well-dressed businessman earlier. May I ask what it's for? The question, a clear breach of standard banking protocol for customers, not flagged for specific security reasons, hung between them thick with unspoken bias. The double standard was no longer subtle. It was a spotlight. My reasons for withdrawing my own money are my personal business, Eleanor stated firmly but respectfully. Does Meridian Financial now require customers to justify legitimate withdrawals within their account limits? Lauren visibly bristled at the challenge to her authority and the implied criticism of bank policy. The mask slipped slightly, revealing a flash of annoyance. She glanced down at Eleanor's ID again, her fingers holding it gingerly by the edges, as if reluctant to make full contact. Mrs. Vance, she said, finally, acknowledging the name but mispronouncing it slightly. Another small, perhaps unintentional sign of disrespect. She looked from the ID back to Eleanor's simple attire. This amount, it just doesn't seem appropriate for someone, well, for your circumstances. She paused, letting the implication sink in. This bank, Mrs. Vance, prides itself on a certain standard, a certain dignity. We cater to a particular class of clientele. Her gaze swept the lobby pointedly, excluding Eleanor frankly. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping but still perfectly audible. We can't serve you here. There it was. No more coded language about security protocols or unusual activity. Just pure, unadulterated prejudice, delivered with the chilling confidence of someone who believed her position insulated her from consequences. Eleanor felt that familiar tightness constrict her chest, the feeling of being reduced, dismissed, stereotyped. Behind Lauren Daniel, Peterson crossed his arms, a silent signal of agreement. Ryan Collins allowed himself a smug smirk. Chloe Miller looked down at her keyboard, her discomfort evident in the flush rising on her neck, but her silence remained a form of complicity. A young mother waiting nearby, witnessing the exchange, pulled her children closer, whispering something in their ears. Perhaps an unconscious lesson in social stratification and suspicion. Eleanor took another slow, deliberate breath, centering herself. The years of navigating biased environments had forged an almost preternatural calm. I see, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Could you please direct me to someone in this branch who can authorize my transaction? Perhaps someone above you. Lauren's smile tightened into a sneer. Ma'am, I am the highest authority in this branch. I am the manager. There is no one else here for you to speak with. She leaned closer again, the scent of her expensive cloying perfume wafting across the counter. Her voice dropped to a stage whisper meant to be overheard. Perhaps you might find the check-cashing place down the street more suitable. They're certainly more accustomed to handling your type of banking needs. You might be able to get 1,000 or 2 there, I suppose. The blatant disrespect, the utter dismissal was stunning. A collective gasp, quickly stifled, rippled through the eavesdropping customers. Behind the counters, the mundane sounds of banking continued. The whir of cash machines, the click of keyboards, a surreal counterpoint to the raw prejudice playing out center stage. Every security camera silently documented the scene. Eleanor met Lauren's gaze, then deliberately looked up at one of the camera domes on the ceiling. A flicker of knowledge of intent crossed her features so brief it was missed by everyone focused on the confrontation. Without another word to the smugly triumphant manager, Eleanor reached into her modest leather purse, a gift from her executive team upon her promotion to COO, and pulled out her mobile phone. "Excuse me for just a moment," she said politely, stepping back slightly from the counter, but ensuring she remained in full view of Lauren, her staff, the customers, and the ever-watchful cameras. The battleground had been defined. Now it was time to call in reinforcements. A single phone call can change everything. As Eleanor Vance speaks a name into her phone, miles away, the gears of corporate power begin to grind, and the eyes of the board turn towards a live feed they were never meant to see. While Lauren Hayes, Ryan Collins, and Daniel Peterson watched Eleanor with varying degrees of smugness and irritation as she stood dialing her phone, none of them could fathom the seismic shift her call was initiating miles away. The quiet confidence with which Eleanor held her ground, her refusal to be intimidated or dismissed, should have been a warning sign. Her knowledge of specific bank policies, another. But blinded by their own prejudice and arrogance, they saw only defiance. Not authority, Ryan nudged Daniel again, whispering something crude, both sharing a smirk at Eleanor's expense. Their performance continued for the benefit of the other staff, and remaining customers, a display meant to reinforce their perceived dominance. Lauren Patience, completely frayed, stepped forward again, her voice sharp. "I'm going to have to ask you to conclude your business elsewhere," she repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You are creating a disturbance in our branch. The lower banks out there will be able to serve you. Not here." The irony remained staggering. The only disturbance stemmed from their own discriminatory actions. Eleanor, however, was no longer primarily focused on Lauren. Her attention was on the voice on the other end of her call. "Yes, hello?" She spoke, her professional tone sharpening further, cutting through the ambient noise of the lobby. "This is Eleanor Vance." Calling Ryan exaggeratedly mimicked her posture, mouthing her name to Daniel, who stifled another laugh. The bank's mission statement, "Trust, respect, integrity," seemed to glare down from the wall in silent mockery. "Yes, I'm still at the downtown branch." Eleanor continued, calmly ignoring Lauren's escalating attempts to interrupt. "No. They've refused the transaction based on, unclear grounds." A slight pause. "Yes, that's correct." Her composure was a stark contrast to Lauren's barely contained fury. People subjected to such public humiliation were supposed to crumble or explode. Eleanor's quiet resistance was deeply unsettling to the manager. Ma'am Lauren's voice rose several notches, the veneer of professionalism shattering completely. "If you do not leave these premises immediately, I will be forced to call security." She signaled emphatically towards Daniel, who reached for the internal security phone extension on the counter. The situation was visibly escalating, drawing the full attention of everyone left in the branch. It was at that precise moment, as Daniel's finger hovered over the button, that Eleanor turned fully away from the increasingly agitated manager and delivered the decisive blow into her phone. Her voice remained clear, steady, but carried an undeniable weight. "Olivia, I need you in the downtown branch now." The name Olivia Grant, head of operations, a name Lauren knew well, a name synonymous with immense corporate power, landed like a stun grenade in the tense lobby. Lauren froze, the arrogant certainty drained from her face, replaced by the first pale tendrils of genuine fear. Olivia Grant, Eleanor Vance. Knew Olivia Grant had her direct number. Who was this woman in the simple hoodie? The assumptions Lauren had built her actions upon began to crumble, but years of ingrained arrogance fought back. It must be a bluff. A desperate part of her mind insisted. Name-dropping people like her always try that. But miles away in the hushed, climate-controlled executive suite of Meridian Financial's headquarters, it was anything but a bluff. Olivia Grant shot bolt upright from her desk the instant she recognized Eleanor's voice and understood the context. Eleanor, her CEO, calling her now from the floor of the flagship branch, needing assistance. This wasn't just irregular, it was unprecedented. Decades of shared battles of navigating corporate minefields as women as allies flashed through Olivia's mind. "Get me every customer complaint from the downtown branch past year," she snapped at her stunned assistant, her voice sharp with urgency. "Every single one. Even the ones they tried to bury." As assistants scrambled, Olivia grabbed her tablet and security badge, her mind already racing connecting dots. The recent data anomalies from that branch, the vague rumors about Lauren Hayes' management style. Her designer heels clicked sharply on the polished floor as she bolted towards the private executive elevator, the one with direct, non-stop access to the ground floor. The storm was coming. When authority commands the unjust, where does loyalty lie? A young security guard faces a moral crossroads as the manager's accusations become increasingly unhinged. Lauren Hayes rattled by Eleanor Vance's unexpected phone call, and the mention of Olivia Grant's name decided force was her only remaining option. Her signal to Daniel Peterson was clear, and he quickly relayed the summons. Moments later, the branch security guard, a young man named Kevin Davis, arrived at the counter. Barely 25, new to the job, Kevin looked deeply uncomfortable, his eyes wide, as he took in the tense standoff between the impeccably dressed, furious manager and the inexplicably calm woman in the hoodie. "I need this woman escorted from the premises immediately," Lauren instructed Kevin, deliberately avoiding eye contact with Eleanor, treating her like an object to be removed rather than a person. Her voice carried the absolute certainty of someone whose authority within these walls had never before been seriously questioned. "She's creating a disturbance." Lauren continued conveniently ignoring the fact that the disturbance stemmed entirely from her staff's behavior, and she's refusing to leave after being denied service. Kevin Davis hesitated. His gaze flickered nervously between Lauren, his direct superior demanding action, and Eleanor, whose quiet dignity and composure seemed entirely at odds with the manager's agitated claims. Something felt fundamentally wrong about the situation. His training had covered robbery protocols, emergency procedures, even diffusing arguments between customers, but nothing had prepared him for the moral complexity of forcibly removing a seemingly calm customer, based solely on the manager's increasingly fraught assertions. Sir Eleanor addressed the guard directly, her voice steady and reasonable, cutting through Lauren's tense pronouncements. "I assure you, I have every right to be here. I am a customer of this bank, attempting to access my own funds. I have provided all the required identification, and I have broken no rules or laws." She met Kevin's uncertain gaze with a look that conveyed not aggression, but simple, factual confidence. Kevin shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his internal conflict palpable. He glanced towards Chloe Miller, who quickly looked away, her own discomfort radiating outwards. He looked at Daniel Peterson, whose expression was hard and impatient. Ma'am Lauren's face flushed, an angry red enraged by the guard's obvious hesitation, and further incensed at being implicitly contradicted in front of her remaining staff and the watching customers. "This is a private business," she snapped her voice, rising sharply, "and we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone, especially someone who may be attempting to commit fraud." The accusation, fraud, hung venomously in the air. It was one of the most serious allegations possible in a banking environment, leveled without a shred of evidence, born purely of prejudice and escalating panic. To anyone observing objectively, the true fraud was becoming increasingly apparent, the fraud of equal service, the fraud of respect, the fraud of the bank's own stated values. Behind Lauren, the staff members who hadn't already retreated subtly closed ranks. Daniel Peterson stood with his arms rigidly crossed, his security badge twisted backward, as if subconsciously hiding his identity. Ryan Collins leaned against the back counter with a satisfied smirk, casually twirling a pen between his fingers, a gesture of utter contempt. Even Chloe Miller, who had seemed deeply uncomfortable moments before, now stood numbly among her colleagues, her eyes fixed resolutely on the floor. The message was clear. It was the institution against the individual, a unified front of misplaced loyalty and ingrained bias aligned against a single customer whose only transgression was expecting to be treated with basic human dignity. The other customers in the branch had ceased all pretense of conducting their own business. Some watched with morbid fascination, others with visible discomfort. It was then that a middle-aged white man who had been waiting impatiently in line decided to insert himself into the situation with the unearned confidence of someone who assumed his opinion was always welcome. He stepped forward, gesturing dismissively towards Eleanor. "Listen, lady," he said loudly, his tone thick with annoyance. "Some of us have real banking to do today. If you're not going to leave, could you at least stop causing trouble for everybody else?" The irony was almost physically painful. Eleanor thought of the countless hours she'd spent in boardrooms, championing customer experience, initiatives, the millions invested in training programs designed to prevent exactly this kind of interaction, all seemingly rendered worthless by the deep-seated biases no corporate memo could apparently eradicate. Rather than engage with the hostile customer or the flustered manager, Eleanor quietly raised her phone again. She continued documenting the escalating situation. Lauren's increasingly erratic behavior, the staff's complicit silence or overt support, the security guard's visible conflict, the other customer's unwarranted intervention, all of it preserved with crystal clarity by the small device in her hand. Each second of footage was another indictment, another nail in the coffin of careers built on prejudice and poor judgment. Lauren saw the phone recording again, and her expression twisted further, the vein in her temple throbbing visibly as she struggled and failed to maintain control. The air crackles with unresolved tension, the manager's power seemingly absolute. But the sound of approaching footsteps signals a shift. Judgment is coming, but from whom and upon whom will it fall? Just as Lauren Hayes noticed Eleanor Vance documenting the scene, her face twisting with further indignation at this perceived defiance, a sound cut through the charged atmosphere, the distinct, almost musical chime of the executive elevator arriving in the main lobby. It was an elevator rarely used by branch clientele, reserved for visiting dignitaries and top-level management descending from the upper floors. Lauren's head turned slightly towards the sound, a flicker of annoyance crossing her features. At the interruption, mingled perhaps with a nascent unease, triggered by Eleanor's earlier phone call. The pressure in the lobby seemed to shift, like the sudden drop before a violent storm. Then the grand double doors leading from the elevator bank burst open with such force they slammed against the marble walls, the sound echoing like a thunderclap through the suddenly silent space. Every head, staff, customer, security guard, snapped towards the entrance. Striding into the center of the lobby was Olivia Grant, head of operations for Meridian Financial, second-in-command of the entire multi-billion-dollar corporation. She moved with the focused intensity of a five-star general entering a compromised command post. Her tailored navy suit, immaculate, her expression radiating controlled fury. Her presence alone commanded immediate, absolute attention. "Stop this, immediately." Olivia's voice wasn't loud, but it carried the unmistakable weight of ultimate authority. Not a request, not a suggestion, but an unequivocal command that froze everyone in place. Lauren Hayes's already flushed face paled visibly. Her irritation morphed instantly into confusion, then dawning sickening fear as she recognized the executive bearing down on them. In her 15 years managing this flagship branch, Olivia Grant had visited, perhaps 3 times, always scheduled weeks in advance, always accompanied by a formal agenda and entourage. This sudden unannounced appearance, coupled with the palpable rage simmering beneath Olivia's icy composure, triggered the first truly visceral wave of panic in Lauren's gut. The tight knot of staff members, Daniel Peterson, Ryan Collins, Chloe Miller, who had formed a defiant wall of institutional solidarity behind Lauren just moments before, suddenly seemed to dissolve. Their certainty evaporated. Ryan's smirk vanished instantly, replaced by wide-eyed apprehension. Daniel's crossed arms dropped heavily to his sides, his power posture collapsing. Chloe looked as though she might genuinely faint, the color draining completely from her face. Attempting a desperate grasp at normalcy, Lauren tried to regain control, reflexively smoothing her already neat hair as she stepped forward, forcing a brittle, practiced customer service smile onto her lips. "Ms. Grant, what an unexpected pleasure," she began, her voice unnaturally high-pitched. "Is there something? Do you have any idea who this is?" Olivia cut her off sharply, her voice slicing through Lauren's attempt at pleasantries. She gestured definitively towards Eleanor, who remained standing composedly amidst the chaos, the calm eye of the storm she had summoned. The question hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Lauren's gaze darted from the imposing figure of Olivia Grant to the woman in the simple hoodie, then back again. Confusion warred with the rapidly growing incline of dread. Her mind raced frantically through possibilities. Was this woman a personal friend of Olivia's? A relative of a powerful board member? A secret shopper? A banking regulator conducting a surprise audit? A potential high-net-worth client they'd somehow offended? None of the possibilities explained the sheer, unadulterated fury radiating from the head of operations. The remaining customers in the branch had abandoned all pretense of conducting their own business. Several now had their phones out, openly recording the escalating confrontation. The elderly woman who had been watching intently nodded slowly, a look of grim satisfaction on her face, as if witnessing long overdue justice finally arrive. Kevin Davis, the young security guard caught in the middle, took another deliberate step backward, subtly, but clearly distancing himself from Lauren, instinctively recognizing which side held the true power and the moral high ground. Olivia Grant took another step forward, closing the distance until she stood directly before Eleanor. Her entire demeanor underwent a remarkable transformation. The righteous anger she had directed at Lauren softened instantly, replaced by profound respect and deep regret as she addressed the woman who had been subjected to such shameful treatment in her own institution. Eleanor Olivia said, her voice now filled with genuine warmth and apology, yet carrying clearly throughout the utterly silent lobby. "I am so deeply sorry you experienced this, especially here in this branch." She paused, letting the weight of her apology sink in, ensuring every employee heard her deference. Then Olivia turned slowly, deliberately back towards Lauren Hayes and her terrified staff. Her expression hardened once more into a mask of cold, executive fury. Her eyes swept over Lauren, Daniel, Ryan, and Chloe, pinning each of them in place. She drew herself up to her full height and announced, her voice ringing with the clarity and finality of a judge delivering a verdict. This, she declared, gesturing unequivocally towards the woman in the hoodie, is Eleanor Vance, the Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Financial, your boss. The truth is out, shattering illusions and leaving stunned silence in its wake. Now the evidence speaks, excuses crumble, and the weight of authority prepares to deliver its judgment. Olivia Grant's words. This is Eleanor Vance, the Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Financial. Your boss landed like physical blows in the suddenly cavernous silence of the lobby. Lauren Hayes staggered back a step, her face contorting in a mask of disbelief, quickly morphing into pure, unadulterated horror. Ryan Collins' hand flew to his mouth, his eyes wide with the sickening realization of who he had been mocking so contemptuously just moments before. Daniel Peterson's already pale face drained of its remaining color, his Adam's apple bobbing convulsively as he swallowed repeatedly against a suddenly dry throat. Chloe Miller began to tremble, visibly, tears finally escaping and streaming down her cheeks as the full weight of the situation crashed down upon her. The irony was crushing. 3 months prior, in the grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel, Lauren Hayes had watched the live stream of Eleanor Vance accepting the ceremonial key to Meridian Financial. She had applauded politely alongside her team during the mandatory staff, viewing, perhaps even made some appropriate comments about progress and leadership. And then, apparently, she had either completely forgotten or willfully chosen not to recognize the face of her own CEO when she walked into her branch, dressed modestly, seeing only what her prejudice allowed her to see. We've been watching. Olivia Grant continued, her voice sharp and cutting through the stunned silence. She held up her tablet, angling the screen so Lauren and her team could see crystal clear footage from the branch's own security cameras, played in damning succession. We've seen exactly how you treated Miss Vance from the moment she walked in. The screen shifted, displaying split-screen comparisons gathered rapidly by the team back at HQ. A white customer making a large withdrawal, processed with smiles and effortless efficiency, juxtaposed directly against Eleanor's identical request, met with suspicion, interrogation, and delay. Another clip showed the wealthy-looking client being escorted immediately to an office, while the elderly black woman in the postal uniform was left waiting nearly 40 minutes for basic assistance. The pattern was undeniable, irrefutable. Every significant interaction in this branch is recorded. Lauren Olivia stated, her voice tight with controlled fury. Every single one. And what we have witnessed today, culminating in this appalling treatment of our CEO, is a pattern of discrimination so blatant, so egregious, that it violates not only every core principle of this company's policy, but also federal banking regulations. Olivia began methodically listing the specific violations, each word another nail in the coffin of their careers. Differential treatment based on perceived race and socio-economic status, failure to follow standard customer verification protocols consistently and equitably across all customers, creating a hostile and intimidating environment for a client attempting to access their own legitimate funds. Falsely accusing a customer of potential fraud without a shred of evidence. Lauren's face had turned an alarming shade of mottled red. The carefully constructed facade of her professional persona was crumbling spectacularly before everyone's eyes, her remaining staff, the wide-eyed customers and the head of operations. This is a misunderstanding. She stammered, her hand instinctively going to smooth her hair again, the gesture now purely a nervous tic rather than a display of power. We have serious security concerns. Large cash withdrawals. The protocols. Save it. Lauren Olivia cut her off dismissively. We reviewed the footage of 3 similar or larger withdrawals processed by your team earlier today for other customers. None of them faced this level of scrutiny. The only protocol you followed consistently was discrimination. Desperate now, Ryan Collins stepped forward, tears suddenly streaming down his face, his earlier arrogance replaced by panicked self-preservation. I was just following Lauren's lead, he pleaded, looking towards Olivia. Then Eleanor. We're trained to be cautious with unusual transactions. I didn't mean. Daniel Peterson attempted a different, more calculated approach, trying to adopt a tone of professional concern, despite his obvious fear. Ms. Grant, Ms. Vance? There have been sophisticated, fraudulent schemes targeting this particular branch recently. We were simply exercising appropriate caution in line with security directives. We have access to every email you've sent. Daniel Olivia interrupted, coldly shutting down his fabricated defense. Every internal memo, every piece of communication logged within this bank's systems. Do not make this infinitely worse for yourselves by lying to us now, as if on cue, the main entrance doors opened again. This time, it wasn't just Olivia Grant. 3 figures entered the lobby, their expressions grave and serious. Arthur Finch, the chairman of the board, Sophia Bellwether, and Robert Sterling, senior board members, the highest authorities in the entire company, besides Eleanor herself. They had come down from the emergency meeting in the executive suite to witness the reckoning firsthand. Their presence elevated what was already a catastrophic personal and professional failure for Lauren and her team into something utterly unprecedented in the bank's long history. Board members simply did not appear on the front lines of daily branch operations, unless something extraordinary, something threatening the very integrity of the institution, demanded their personal attention. The lobby, already hushed, somehow became even quieter. Customers watched wide-eyed as the most powerful people in the organization formed a silent, supportive semicircle around Eleanor Vance, a physical manifestation of the institutional backing that should have been implicit all along. Throughout this entire latter part of the confrontation, since Olivia's arrival, Eleanor had remained largely silent, observing, assessing. This wasn't about personal vindication for her. It was about witnessing a systemic failure that as CEO was now her explicit responsibility to correct decisively and thoroughly. When she finally spoke again, breaking the charged silence, her voice was calm, measured, devoid of anger, but carrying the unmistakable weight of absolute, final authority. Lauren Hayes. She addressed the manager first, making direct, unwavering eye contact. Ryan Collins. Her gaze shifted to him. Daniel Peterson. Lastly, she looked at the senior teller. You are terminated. Effective immediately. There was no raised voice, no dramatic flourish, just the simple, incontrovertible exercise of power by the person who held it absolutely. Your actions today. Eleanor continued calmly, addressing all 3, have demonstrated a fundamental incompatibility with the values of this institution and the legal requirements of fair banking practices under which we operate. This is not a suspension. This is not a performance improvement opportunity. This is the end of your employment with Meridian Financial. The guilty have been excised, but the damage remains. In the quiet after the storm, a leader confronts not just the failure of others, but the weight of the system itself, and searches for any sign of salvageable ground. Lauren Hayes's face contorted through a rapid sequence of shock, disbelief, fury, humiliation, and finally the crushing, dawning realization that her carefully constructed 15-year career at Meridian Financial had just ended in spectacular, undeniable public failure of her own making. You can't just... She began, a desperate, reflexive denial sputtering from her lips. Eleanor Vance simply raised her hand slightly, a small gesture that nonetheless carried immense weight. Lauren fell instantly silent, the fight visibly draining out of her icon. Eleanor stated her voice, calm but utterly final. "And I have..." She turned her attention to the security guard who had been watching the entire scene unfold his earlier conflict, now replaced by resolute attention. "Kevin," she nodded towards him. "Please escort these former employees to collect their personal belongings, and then immediately off the premises." Kevin Davis straightened his relief at having clear, unambiguous orders almost palpable. "Yes, ma'am," he replied crisply, stepping forward with newfound purpose to manage the exit of the 3 disgraced employees. As Kevin began to lead Lauren, Ryan, and Daniel towards the back offices to gather their things, the remaining customers and staff watched in stunned, absolute silence. There was no cheering, no whispered celebration, just the solemn, almost uncomfortable witnessing of swift, high-level accountability being enforced just before being led away through a side door. Lauren shot a final venomous glare back not at the CEO who had fired her, nor the COO who had exposed her, but directly at the trembling Chloe Miller. "You..." Lauren hissed, her voice low, but dripping with malice that spoke volumes about misplaced blame, or perhaps some prior history between them. "You could have backed me." Then she was gone. The heavy silence lingered. Eleanor let it sit for a moment, allowing the finality of the event to settle. Then she walked slowly towards the now empty manager's office, the space still seeming to hold the echo of Lauren Hayes's arrogant confidence. She paused at the large window overlooking the bustling city street below, gazing out but seeing little. The weight of the morning pressed down on her. It wasn't the personal insult that lingered. She had faced far worse over her career. It was the stark, ugly reality of the systemic rot she had just witnessed firsthand, the casual cruelty, the ingrained bias, the complicit silence, all operating openly in her flagship branch. Firing 3 individuals was necessary, but it was merely treating a symptom. The disease ran deeper. Olivia Grant joined her by the window, placing a supportive hand briefly on her shoulder. "The board is fully behind whatever comes next." "Eleanor," Olivia said quietly, "whatever it takes." Eleanor nodded, taking a deep, fortifying breath, turning back towards the lobby. The reflection was over. The work was just beginning. Her eyes scanned the remaining staff members, huddled near the teller line. Their reactions were varied. Some looked pale and shaken, avoiding her gaze entirely. Others seemed simply numb. One older teller, however, met Eleanor's eyes with an expression that looked unmistakably like relief, as if a long festering boil had finally been lanced. Then Eleanor's gaze settled on Chloe Miller. The young teller stood apart from the others, trembling tears still tracking down her face, bracing herself for what she clearly expected to be the inevitable conclusion to her involvement. Eleanor approached her slowly, deliberately. Chloe flinched almost imperceptibly as the CEO stopped before her. Instead of the dismissal Chloe anticipated, Eleanor spoke quietly, her voice low enough that only Chloe could hear clearly, amidst the residual tension. "Tell me, Chloe." Eleanor began, her tone serious, but not unkind. "What were you thinking when all of that was happening?" Chloe looked up, startled by the question, by the invitation to speak, rather than just be judged. I, she stammered, fresh tears welling. I knew it wasn't right, Miss Vance. What they were saying, how they were treating you. It felt wrong, but Lauren is the manager, and Daniel. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I just froze. Her voice broke. On a sob of shame and fear, Eleanor listened intently, searching the young woman's face, hearing the genuine remorse beneath the fear. She saw not the hardened prejudice of the others, but the paralyzing effect of a toxic culture on someone lower down the chain. An opportunity, perhaps, a difficult choice presented itself. With the immediate crisis addressed, the path forward remains uncertain. Can a culture be rebuilt from the ground up? And can leadership emerge from the most unexpected places? Having acknowledged Chloe Miller's remorse and fear, Eleanor Vance turned her attention back to the remaining group of shell-shocked employees huddled near the teller stations. The board members stood silently nearby, observing, lending their implicit support to whatever actions their CEO deemed necessary next. Olivia Grant had already stepped aside, discreetly coordinating with headquarters via her tablet, initiating the rarely used emergency protocols, transferring management authority from Lauren Hayes, securing access credentials, establishing temporary leadership structures until permanent replacements could be vetted and installed. The practicalities of the transition were already underway. Eleanor addressed the assembled staff, her voice calm, but imbued with an undeniable resolve that commanded their full attention. "What happened here today?" She began, her gaze sweeping across their faces. Meeting the eyes of those brave enough to look up is not just about the unacceptable actions of 3 individuals. It is about a culture, a complacency, perhaps, that allowed those actions, those attitudes to seem permissible, a culture that allowed bias to override policy and basic human decency. She saw nods of shame-faced acknowledgement from some, while others continued to stare blankly, perhaps still processing the magnitude of the morning's events. The older teller, who had looked relieved earlier, now nodded more emphatically. "That culture ends today," Eleanor stated firmly. "Meridian. Financial exists to serve all customers with dignity, with respect, and with absolute fairness. These are not just words on our mission statement hanging on the wall behind me. They are the non-negotiable standard by which every single interaction within this bank, from this moment forward, will be measured." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Every branch, every department, every single role in this organization will be evaluated moving forward, not just on profitability, though that remains important, but on equitable service, on fostering an environment where both employees and customers feel valued and respected, regardless of their background or appearance. The metrics we value will reflect the company we intend to be. Then, turning back towards the still trembling Chloe Miller, Eleanor made the decision that would send ripples through the entire organization. She saw the young woman's fear, her remorse, but also the flicker of awareness, the recognition of wrongness that had been absent in the others. It was a risk, certainly, but leadership sometimes required betting on potential, on the possibility of growth, learning to stand up against wrongdoing. Chloe Eleanor said, her voice softening slightly, but still audible to the group. Especially when it comes from figures of authority, is one of the hardest skills to develop, but it is also one of the most valuable. She paused for effect. That is why Chloe Miller, effective. Immediately, you are being promoted to interim branch manager for this location." A collective gasp, sharp and audible, rippled through the staff members. Even Olivia Grant raised an eyebrow almost imperceptibly. Chloe's eyes widened in utter shock, disbelief, warring with confusion. But Ms. Vance, I'm just a teller. I failed to." "You are someone," Eleanor cut in gently but firmly, "who recognized that what was happening was fundamentally wrong, even if you felt you lacked the tools or the confidence in that moment to stop it. That awareness, Chloe, that nascent moral compass, is the foundation we need to build upon here. You will have comprehensive support. You will have training. You will have resources poured into this branch. But more importantly, you will bring the perspective of someone who has seen firsthand how things can go terribly wrong, and who I believe is now committed to making them right." The decision was audacious, unconventional, but deeply symbolic. It signaled that accountability went both ways: punishment for transgression, but also opportunity for those who demonstrated genuine remorse and a willingness to learn. The next morning, proving Eleanor's gamble might pay off, Chloe, looking both overwhelmed and fiercely determined, held her first brief staff meeting. Her initial directive wasn't about sales targets or transaction times. It was about proactive, respectful customer engagement. And then she led by example, personally spending nearly an hour patiently assisting an elderly, visibly hesitant customer navigate a complex international money transfer, explaining every step with kindness and clarity. A small, tangible action that spoke volumes, setting a new, immediate tone for the branch's path forward. The internal cleanup has begun, but true change requires transparency and systemic overhaul. Now facing the world, Meridian Financial must make a public stand. Will words translate into meaningful action? 3 days after the tumultuous events at the flagship branch, Eleanor Vance stood behind a different kind of counter, a polished podium emblazoned with the Meridian Financial logo, facing a sea of journalists, flashing cameras and recording devices. The press conference had been hastily arranged, but meticulously choreographed by Olivia Grant and her team to deliver a clear, powerful message, leaving no room for ambiguity about the bank's future direction. Eleanor's professional attire and commanding presence offered a stark, deliberate contrast to the modest clothing she had worn during her undercover visit just days earlier. The board members, Arthur Finch, Sophia Bellwether, Robert Sterling, flanked her on the stage, their unified presence a carefully constructed public demonstration of institutional commitment to the path she was about to lay out. What the assembled press didn't know, of course, was how contentious the emergency board meeting following the incident had truly been. Several members had initially balked at the unprecedented scale of the investment Eleanor demanded, and the potential reputational damage from such a public admission of fault. It had taken Eleanor laying out, with cold, hard clarity, the significant legal, financial, and ethical risks of inaction, bolstered by the undeniable evidence from the branch security footage, to finally bring the last holdouts around. Now they stood beside her outwardly, at least committed to the transformation she was spearheading. "Good morning," Eleanor began, her voice, calm and resonant, filling the crowded conference room. "Today, Meridian Financial is announcing our new equitable banking initiative." She paused, letting the name sink in. This comprehensive program represents an immediate investment of $50 million, dedicated to fundamentally reshaping our approach to customer service, community engagement, and internal accountability. She outlined the initiative's key pillars: mandatory enhanced anti-discrimination and implicit bias training developed in partnership with leading civil rights organizations, significant investment in outreach programs targeting underserved communities, revamped internal accountability systems, including anonymous reporting channels and independent oversight, and crucially, redesigned performance metrics for branch managers and loan officers that explicitly tied bonuses and advancement to demonstrable improvements in equitable service delivery, alongside traditional financial targets. "Let me be unequivocal," Eleanor stated firmly, meeting the gaze of the cameras head-on. "Banking discrimination isn't just morally wrong. It is bad business. It is short-sighted. When we fail to serve all communities equitably, we leave talent-undeveloped businesses unfunded and potential unrealized. We shortchange not only our customers, but ourselves and the economy as a whole." Her gesture then directed attention to the front row, where a diverse group of individuals sat quietly. These practices have real consequences for real people. That's why I'm particularly grateful to have several individuals here today who have bravely agreed to share their past experiences with Meridian financial experiences that fell far short of the standards we espouse. She named them David Morgan, a successful entrepreneur whose loan application was repeatedly denied despite impeccable credentials; Isabel Rossi, who was steered away from premium banking services she clearly qualified for; Ethan Wright, whose attempt to open a simple business account was met with excessive documentation requirements not demanded of other clients. These individuals, Eleanor announced, along with others who have shared their stories, have agreed to serve on our newly established Client Equity Advisory Board. Their lived experiences will directly inform our policies, procedures, and training moving forward, ensuring that our commitment to fairness is not just theoretical, but grounded in the reality our customers face. The announcement, the unprecedented public admission, the significant financial commitment, and the establishment of the Client Advisory Board would make national news positioning Eleanor Vance not just as a CEO cleaning up a mess, but as a potential face for corporate accountability and systemic change in America. The pledge had been made publicly. Now the hard work of implementation truly began. Concluding thought. True transformation isn't a single event, but a continuous journey. Policies can change overnight, but attitudes require constant cultivation and unwavering vigilance. In the weeks and months that followed the press conference, Eleanor Vance became a reluctant but powerful symbol of corporate accountability in America. She didn't seek the spotlight, but she didn't shy away from the responsibility either. Guided by the Client Equity Advisory Board and supported by Olivia Grant and a revitalized executive team, she relentlessly implemented the promised changes outlined in the Equitable Banking Initiative. Revised hiring practices aimed at attracting more diverse talent were rolled out. Performance metrics for managers were fundamentally overhauled explicitly, linking compensation to measurable equity outcomes alongside traditional financial targets. Anonymous customer experience surveys were rigorously analyzed, disaggregated by demographic data, to proactively identify and address emerging disparities before they became entrenched patterns. Training programs were redesigned from the ground up, incorporating real-world scenarios and direct input from civil rights organizations and banking regulators, and perhaps most visibly in every single Meridian financial branch across the country. Near the teller windows, a new elegantly designed sign appeared. It read simply, "All customers deserve respect, dignity, and fair service. If your experience does not reflect these values, please call this number directly." Below it was not a generic hotline, but the direct office line for Eleanor Vance. CEO. It was a bold statement of personal accountability, rarely answered directly by her, but constantly monitored by her executive staff, ensuring issues were flagged and addressed at the highest level 6 months after the incident that had inadvertently catalyzed this sweeping transformation. Eleanor once again donned casual clothing, simple slacks, a different hoodie, and visited several branches unannounced. This time her purpose wasn't to expose discrimination, but to witness the changes taking root, to gauge the effectiveness of the new policies and training, to listen. She saw undeniable improvements. Interactions seemed generally more consistent. Staff appeared more consciously attentive to diverse clientele, and the overt hostility she had experienced was absent. She saw Chloe Miller thriving in her interim role at the flagship branch, leading with a quiet determination, born of experience. Yet Eleanor also observed lingering hesitations, the subtle persistence of ingrained habits, slow to die. In one suburban branch, she overheard a hushed conversation between 2 veteran tellers, subtly questioning the necessity of the new sensitivity rules, changing policies. Eleanor knew was the essential first step. Changing long-held attitudes, unconscious biases, and workplace cultures. That was the long, arduous, ongoing work. The peace Meridian Financial was beginning to experience was real, but it was an earned peace demanding constant vigilance. The scars from past failures remained serving as necessary reminders. The transformation had begun decisively and powerfully, but the journey towards true, deeply embedded equity she understood was far from over. It required unwavering commitment every single day. How often do we truly see the person standing before us, beyond the surface, beyond our own assumptions? Eleanor Vance's journey reminds us that dignity isn't defined by attire or appearance, and potential can be hidden beneath the most unexpected exteriors. It's easy to judge, to categorize, but perhaps harder, and infinitely more valuable to pause and offer respect at first. Maybe we've all felt underestimated at times, or perhaps witnessed moments where snap judgments overshadowed fairness, that quiet battle for recognition, for equitable treatment. It's a current that runs deep in the human experience, isn't it? This story truly resonated with us, sparking conversations about perception, courage, and the long path toward meaningful change. We believe these journeys, even fictional ones, have the power to connect us, and we'd love to know how it connected with you. What part of Eleanor's experience, or the reactions of the staff, made you think the most? Was it the initial judgment, the bystander effect, or the difficult steps towards accountability? Share your reflections in the comments below. Let's discuss the moments that mattered. If Eleanor's stand for dignity and fairness touched your heart, please give this video a like. And if you feel this story carries a message that others might find valuable or encouraging, please consider sharing it to join us for more stories that explore the complexities of human nature and the pursuit of justice. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next emotional journey together. Thank you for watching and for being part of our community. Until next time, take care.